All right. So as Caleb said, my technical title is environmental consultant, but I am the state pretreatment coordinator. I've been in my role for a little over a year and a half, but I've been with the state for 5 years, all 5 years in pretreatment. So I hope to be able to share some of my knowledge on what pretreatment is. This will be a very, very basic overview. Some of you may already know everything that is presented today. Some of you may learn. I hope that I can share some information. So I'll just be going over what is pretreatment, some common terms and acronyms, and TDEC's role in pretreatment. So some history about it. Where does it come from? The National Pretreatment Program is a component of what I like to call NIPDES, which is part of the Clean Water Act. To meet the Clean Water Act, EPA developed pretreatment regulations for existing and new sources of pollutants, which are outlined in 40 CFR Part 403. These are for categorical industries. Not every industry that is part of the pretreatment program falls under those categories. In 1983, Tennessee was authorized to run its state pretreatment program as the approval authority. So I'll go over a little bit of the hierarchy in a few slides. So what is a pretreatment program? Well, first off, pretreatment is at its base a pollutant control requirement for non-domestic sources that are discharging wastewater to sewer systems that are connected to a wastewater facility. From 40 CFR 403, the term pretreatment is defined as the reduction of the amount of pollutants, the elimination of pollutants, or the alteration of the nature of pollutants in wastewater prior to or in lieu of discharging to a wastewater facility. The program refers to the control requirements for the non-domestic sources. And one distinction to be made is that although treatment technology may be required to treat those non-domestic wastewater prior to discharge, the pretreatment program does not dictate the specific technology requirement for treating said wastewater. It does, however, require those non-domestic sources to comply with the requirements and controls set by regulations. The National Pretreatment Program is implemented by the combined efforts of EPA, state, local agencies, and municipalities. As mentioned, it's authorized under the Clean Water Act. So I briefly touched on this, but the purpose of the program is to prevent introduction of pollutants that will interfere, pass through, or be incompatible. So what that means is, I'm going to go forward a slide and then come back a little bit. So this is a fun graphic of pretreatment that I love to use. At the bottom here, let's see if I can use down here is our river where we have our effluent from our wastewater facility. So all of the treated water entering our rivers, streams, lakes of the state. Right here we have our wastewater facility. That's where the actual treatment of the wastewater is taking place. Back here we have our industries. Those are our contributors to our wastewater facility. And then in between we have our collection system. And finally over here we have our sludge disposal. Um, so our sludge disposal is one of the potential ways that industries could impact the facility. If an industry is discharging pollutants at a concentration to where the way that they are treated is by coming out in the solids, the wastewater facility may not be able to sell those solids or give those solids to a farmer to apply them to a farmland. They may instead have to take those to a special landfill or just a landfill in general because the pollutant concentrations are too high to allow for land application. So that's one of the aspects that we're trying to control with the pretreatment program is to allow wastewater facilities to land apply biosolids wherever possible. Another one is to keep the workers and the workers of the wastewater facility and collection system safe. One of the largest hazards for a collection system worker is going out into the system, popping a manhole, and having um, hydrogen sulfide fumes, which are potentially introduced by industry. So we're trying to protect their health and safety. Um, we're trying to protect the collection system itself from corrosion. So think of pH of your discharge. If the pH of your discharge is too low or too high, it could cause problems with the piping of the collection system itself, which could cause holes, as seen here. Let's see if it'll let me highlight. Yeah. So the hole that's kind of eaten away at that pipe there, that results in what we call I&I. So you've got groundwater that leaches into the wastewater or wastewater that leaches out. So that's obviously something that we want to minimize wherever possible. And then the last thing that we're really trying, or sorry, not the last thing, we have two more. The next to last thing that we're trying to protect against is what we call interference. Majority of our treatment plants, especially in Tennessee, are what we call biological treatment. So the wastewater itself is treated by bugs. We call it activated sludge, and it's filled with all of these microscopic bugs that eat away at the pollutants and um, and the solids to result in clean water going to our rivers. If the pollutants that are entering the wastewater facility are in too high of a concentration, it can kill those bugs. And then the bugs aren't able to do their job, and the water leaving the plant is dirty. And then the last thing that leads me to the last thing we're trying to prevent, which is pass through. Pass through is something where we issue each municipality or wastewater facility specific limits that they have to meet on the water that's leaving their plant and entering the rivers and streams. If the industrial pollutants are too high, they could potentially not be treated, period, because the bugs have died, or they're incompatible with the type of bugs that are present, or something else happens that results in untreated wastewater entering the rivers. And that's what we call pass through. So to go back a slide, our big things that we're trying to prevent are interference, pass through, or being compatible with the plant. And then to improve opportunities to recycle and reclaim wastewaters and sludges and to protect workers. So this is a lovely diagram of before and after implementing pretreatment and the reduction of copper concentration in clams. So this was a situation where um, the effluent was going into a river that had a clam population that had a high amount of copper observed. The municipality or wastewater facility was able to backtrack in their collection system to an industry that was discharging copper. They placed limits on that industry. The industry was able to clean their water to meet the limits. The treatment plant was able to treat the water better, and as such, the copper concentrations in the clams reduced. Any questions so far? Because I just went through a lot. Okay. If I'm going too fast, let me know. All right, so what is the hierarchy? How does TDEC fall into this? So EPA developed the National Pretreatment Program, and they designated some approval authority to TDEC. So EPA oversees us, and then we, myself and a couple other people, oversee all of the pretreatment programs in the state. So if you are in a local city or municipality, yes, sure. So a definition of non-domestic wastewater is any wastewater that is not coming from a house, apartment. Um, those are the main ones that are immediately kind of marked off for domestic wastewater. Then outside of houses and apartments, places where you live, we typically consider non-domestic waste to be kind of process waste. Sorry, I'm trying to break it down in an easier way. So a lot of times, okay, think of a warehouse. If a warehouse is not actually doing any kind of manufacturing or anything that uses water outside of just their bathrooms, then we'll consider them a domestic discharger. However, if you have a industry that is a factory and they're manufacturing lawnmowers, any water that's used in the actual manufacturing of lawnmowers would be process waste. Any from the bathrooms would be domestic. But there's also a category of non-domestic that is not process. So if you have a cooling tower or a boiler at your industry, cooling tower blowdown or boiler blowdown are not considered process waste, but they're also not domestic waste. So there's a little bit of a caveat there. Think basically at the bare minimum, domestic waste is your bathrooms, non-domestic waste is anything else. Does that answer the question? Okay. All right. So, perfect. Thank you, sir. Okay. So, EPA oversees us. We oversee the municipalities. So, a municipality who has an industry move in that meets a definition of a SIU, CIU, or an SCIU, which I'll go over those in a second, they are required to develop a pretreatment program. And so they will submit a slew of paperwork to TDEC for approval, and that's all of the aspects of their program from limits, how often they're going to inspect, how they're going to pay for the program, as well as the legal authority to actually enforce against any industrial violations. So we at TDEC will approve their program, and then we oversee it through inspections and audits to make sure that the municipality is doing everything they're supposed to do as part of their program. And then the municipality is who will issue the permits directly to the industry. So the municipality sets the limits on the industry, TDEC sets the limits on the municipality, EPA just makes sure that everybody's doing what they're supposed to do. All right, so what is an SIU, IU, non-IU? So you think of industrial user, that's a large group. That's this whole group out here. That's indirect discharge. Is a discharge, um, sorry, is anyone, try that again. An IU is basically any source of a non-domestic discharge. So what we were talking about earlier with the domestic being the bathrooms, non-domestic being everything else. We consider anybody who discharges non-domestic waste to be an IU. That includes restaurants, shopping malls, hospitals, jails, things like that. Those are considered industries as well. But with inside that large indirect discharge group, you have the smaller one with the industrial users, which include the dentists, the waste haulers, the food service, the NSCIUs. Um, and then you have an even smaller group of those who are significant industrial users. The significant industrial users are held to four definitions. They could meet any one of these four, and they're automatically an SIU. So it could be 25,000 gallons per day or more of process wastewater. So earlier when I was talking about that industry that has the lawnmower manufacturing where they have process waste, they may also have cooling towers. Cooling towers are not considered process waste. So we're only focused on process wastewater. If the industry discharges 5% or more of the dry weather organic or hydraulic loading to the POTW, so that's either flow or think of things like ammonia, BOD, TSS. If you have any of those pollutants at a high concentration, that's more than 5% of what the receiving plant can handle, then you're automatically an industry or a significant industrial user, sorry. If you're designated as a categorical industrial user, so back on my first slide, I made the comment about how EPA defined a set of effluent guidelines for categorical industrial users under 40 CFR 403. That's what that means. If you meet any of the categories that are assigned in 40 CFR Chapter I, Subchapter N, then you are deemed a categorical industrial user. The last one is kind of our catch-all. That's designated by the control authority, which is the municipality or city in this example, for reasonable potential. So, what does reasonable potential means? It means that you may be a warehouse, but you're a warehouse that stores large quantities of chemicals and you have floor drains. So, there's a high chance that you could discharge. You could have a punctured drum that goes down the floor drain into the sewer, which could cause severe problems to both the municipality and yourself. So that would be something that we would deem reasonable potential. Um, I won't go too much into it, but the NSCIU over here, those are industries that meet one of the categories assigned by EPA, but they discharge less than 100 gallons per day. So they can petition to be categorized as a non-significant categorical, and that just changes some of their requirements. All right, so that was a very, very brief but also in-depth overview of what pretreatment is. These are some of the resources I have. This is our pretreatment team that are based out of Nashville. We also have inspectors in all of our field offices that do pretreatment inspections. But does anybody have any questions just immediately?
I'm not seeing anybody type in right now. Let me double check and make sure nobody's got their hand up. There is like a little raise hand button, so you can do that if you would like for me to unmute you to ask your questions. But also feel free. Everybody's able to see in the chat, so you can ask your questions there if you'd like. Um, all right. So
All
Samantha,
right.
thanks. Oh, good.
I was gonna go. You go ahead. I was gonna continue on for the town of Smyrna. Go ahead.
So we actually have somebody that's typing. I'm wondering if they're trying to ask you. But yeah, and so Samantha, uh, first off, appreciate all the work that you do, and thanks for that presentation. And I was going to mention that, or like I mentioned earlier, London Oberlease from the town of Smyrna was going to talk about Smyrna's wastewater treatment plant and example of the damage that an upset from industry can cause. And so I think Samantha was going to help us talk a little bit about that from her perspective, since London wasn't able to be here today. And Calvin, you said, will these slides be available? I'm pretty sure, Samantha and Bethany, that you guys are okay with sharing your slides. If there is anything that you guys don't or aren't able to share, I'll take those out. But yeah, we will be putting those in a PDF and then sending those out to with the follow-up for this webinar. Here's another question that came in. Are there specific pre-treatment requirements for each type of industry, for example, food and beverage processing facilities?
So as far as specific pre-treatment requirements for types of industries, it's only specified if you fall under one of the categorical um, groups. If you do not fall under one of those, there are not specific requirements, but there are kind of just known requirements, or not requirements, but known caveats. So with food and beverage, we tend to see more limitations on BOD and things like that because those tend to be higher out of food manufacturers. So I went a little bit over time with my presentation, so I'm going to try to be fast but also thorough. So back in 2021, so 4 years ago in January, there was an industry in Smyrna, Tennessee that had had some issues in the past with some acetone exceedances of their permit and had actually been in what we call S&C a few times, which is significant noncompliance, and that's due to a high amount of violations with their permit. Um, and then there was in In January 2021, there was a toxic discharge of an estimated 600,000 gallons of acetone that was released to the sewer and caused a major plant upset. It took roughly 2 months to recover and restore normal operations and compliance, and at the time of the upset, When I say upset, I mean that earlier when my presentation, when I talked about the bugs dying, the 600,000 gallons of acetone absolutely killed every single bug that was in their plant. It just completely washed it out. And so there was effectively raw sewage just going right out of the plant because it couldn't do what it was supposed to do. It was completely untreated. The receiving stream had to be closed off and had sheriff's office like patrolling it to make sure that people weren't swimming because it just wasn't safe. And it took them about 2 months to recover and restore just normal operations. And that required them to contact other local plants to get seeding, which is where they get a sample of bugs from other plants and basically put it into their own to try and grow the population to get it back to what it was. Um, and they had So that's kind of the overview. They had 2 months where they took them that long to get it back up and running. But they also had the reason this had all happened is apparently there was a planned bypass by the industry. That's something that happens for maintenance and whatnot. But one of the common requirements in an industrial permit is that if there are any known or planned bypasses for maintenance purposes, they're required to notify the city. Well, there was no notification to the city, so the city wasn't aware that a bypass was going to occur. There was also a failure within the bypass process. It was supposed to, on site, bypass to a diversion tank, fill up that tank, and then they were going to slowly feed it back into the system. Well, it failed. And so rather than going to the tank, it diverted to the sewer. So there were two major issues there. One, the industry didn't notify the city of what was coming. So the city had no idea about this planned bypass. So when their plant started having severe issues out of nowhere, it took them a while to figure out where it was coming from to begin with. But two, then there was the on-site failure of the diversion tank. Um, so the the breakdown from the industry of the situation was that when they were attempting to regulate flow, some of the discharge was placed into frac tanks, which sat without aeration for several days. And then that water was returned to the system and caused an ammonia slug, which contributed to the municipality violating their ammonia limit. And the industry promised that in the future, if they were to ever need a bypass or something like that again, they would just instead have it all hauled off. Um, but I apologize, guys. I do not have a full presentation for this, so I'm running through my notes of when I was helping out Smyrna when this all happened. Um, Okay, so not only did it wipe out their plant to where they had that upset and they had to go through the seeding process, but it also caused them to need to do increased aeration for ammonia removal and diminished microorganism population, which created a settling problem in their clarifiers. While all reasonable measures were taken to alleviate the situation within the plant, they conducted extensive sampling of the industries to determine if toxicity was to blame, and that's when they found out who had actually caused it. But up until those extensive sampling that they had done, their plant was just wiping out without any knowledge of who had caused it or where it was coming from. Um, So they finally discovered it was from one industry. They reached out to the industry. The industry did an internal investigation, and that's when they found out about the failure to their diversion tank. So this was not a one-time 600,000 gallon release. This was over 3 days. I apologize for not saying that earlier. Um, but because of that, it led to severe months of repeated sampling by the municipality because even once they got everything reseeded, they had to continuously sample to make sure it was actually running properly. They had to adjust what we call the mixed liquor sludge or sorry, MLSS, which is kind of the food for the bugs. They had to adjust that constantly to try and make sure that the populations were growing properly. Um, all in all, I don't have a total number, but I believe it cost them somewhere in the six-figure range to actually reseed their plant, pay for the additional chemicals that were needed, pay for the additional aeration that was needed for ammonia removal, pay for the some of the cleanup that needed to be done with the receiving stream. And they are, even though that's been 4 years ago, they're still dealing with and finding some issues that were occurred as part of that this many years later. So they're starting to see some of that corrosion and issues within their collection system that they attribute to that large amount of acetone that came through it 4 years ago. And so now they're having to go through and try to make um, fixes in their collection system to their pipes to keep everything moving along. As far as the no contact advisory, I know for a fact was in place for about 3 weeks. I'm not sure how much beyond that it was in place. Um, as I'm sure everyone here knows, news cycles are constantly rotating. So the local news was only reporting on it for a few weeks. And then past that, they had found something else that they were reporting on. So I don't have an exact timeline for how long the receiving stream was closed off and no one was allowed to enter. I do know that there were signs posted, and I not temporary signs, but permanent signs posted, so that in the future, if this ever happened again, basically it says, hey, this swimming hole is downstream of a wastewater plant. Please be cautious of swimming. They basically decided to it's not illegal to swim there now, but there's a postage sign that recommends you not swim there. Um, as far as drinking water intakes, I would have to look at the map to see, because I do know, as one thing that I always try to tell people in pretreatment is anywhere, any stream or river that the effluent of a wastewater discharges to, somewhere downstream is a drinking water uptake. It may not be for several river miles, but I guarantee you that somewhere downstream there's a drinking water intake. As far as whether it was affected by this specific spill, I'll have to double check, which I can do right now. Um, and I'll let Bethany go if while I look that up. That way you guys aren't waiting for me to do that. And I can type the answer in the chat.
Thanks, Samantha. All right, so yeah, we're gonna move straight on over to Bethany Knight. She is the EHS Environmental Health and Safety Manager with Colgate. I always mess this up. Palmolive? Palmolive? um,
Palmolive. Colgate Palmolive.
Palmolive. Okay. In Morristown. So she's going to be speaking sort of on an example of how her facility does industrial pretreatment in their program, and then the steps sort of needed to comply with the local pretreatment program's requirements. Really just sort of a case study on best practices, if you will, from the industry perspective. So without further ado, I will pass it on over to Bethany.
Okay, can you see my screen? Okay.
Correct. Yes.
All right. So I'm Bethany Knight. I'm the EHS manager at Colgate Palmolive. We're in Morristown, Tennessee. This is my team. On a day that we were having some issues at our wastewater treatment plant. So Timmy was very unhappy, but we were getting through it. So just information on industrial user permit. Um, just from the very beginning, read your permit, understand your requirements, and that just helps to ensure that you're meeting your discharge limits, monitoring and reporting requirements, and then it's also reducing the risk for any violations. Also, it protects worker safety, kind of like the diagram that we saw with the gases. Um, And then it's controlling hazardous discharges and spills. It also clarifies sampling, record keeping, and inspections, what you're supposed to be doing. All of that's lined out in there. And then you guys can read all this later. I won't read it all to you, but if you ain't got time for that, use your assistant. So a lot of AI has been happening. So if your company allows AI, it can speed up the review of some and give you the summary of what all you need to know. Or if you just have a brain blank and you're like, man, what's my daily discharge limit? And you don't want to go through the entire permit, AI can help you to find it very quickly. Also, understand the process, not only at your facility, but also at the wastewater treatment plant where your water is going. So we have a very good relationship with Morristown City. So we were just like, hey, can we come take a tour of the wastewater treatment plant? And they said, absolutely. So if you're curious, just call up your wastewater treatment manager and ask for a tour. Build a relationship with the city. Um, just build that trust. We have some capital projects in the works and it could potentially impact our wastewater. So we invited our inspector, our pre-treatment coordinator, and the wastewater treatment plant manager to come out just to review some of the changes. And they were able to give us some feedback or some things that we hadn't even considered. So very good relationship both ways. And then if there's ever a hiccup in your system or possibly at the city system, you can work together to try to figure out those things. At Colgate, we have very minty toothpaste and mouthwash. So um, based on different industries. There's also chicken plants in the area. You kind of can tell the difference, especially once it gets to the city, if it's potentially a Colgate smell or a chicken plant smell. But just building that relationship, you're able to go back and forth with each other to kind of figure out what's going on. And then sustainability. So a lot of us have goals to reduce energy and water consumption. We use a lot of water in our product, but also for cleaning. So one of the things that we're trying to do to help reduce some of our water consumption is to do more chemical cleaning versus just hot water cleaning. Production scheduling is huge. Going back and forth between our formulas, we have to do cleaning, CNSing. So if the production schedulers are able to schedule in a way, it can help reduce some of that cleaning. And then internal water reuse, we have an RO reverse osmosis system. So we're looking into ways of how we can reuse that water because we discharge quite a bit of that. So my presentation was pretty short, simple, sweet. If you want to add me on LinkedIn, there's a QR code. If you have any other questions, there's my email. Any questions for me or industry? I've been at Colgate for almost 4 years, been in EHS about 12 years, a lot of different industry, wastewater experience, lead acid battery plants. That was definitely the most complex and riskiest experience that I've had, but some other plants that I've worked at has also had wastewater plants.
I don't know if you saw that question. It says, what parameter or parameters is Colgate treating for?
Our biggest one is pH, but we also test for heavy metals. Zinc used to be a main ingredient in a lot of our formulas. You may have noticed our new Colgate Total branding logo change. So that formula has been reformulated. So anytime something like that happens, we work with the city and also our chemical treatment provider because the chemistry may change. We may need different chemicals for our process. Also BOD, COD, those are some of the main ones. And then we have biweekly, quarterly, monthly, different scheduling for our testing. And then we work with Waypoint. And then whenever we get the results, the people at the city also automatically get the results at that time. I hadn't seen it set up that way before, but it lets everybody know everything at the same time. The city doesn't have to wait on like a monthly report or semi-annual report. Do you work? Yes, we work very well with our pre-treatment person. Anytime we have questions, we give them a call. We have a cell phone number, shoot them a text. And it could be anything, a question about whatever. Anytime if our EHS team changes, we always ask to go out and do a plant tour of their wastewater treatment plant, just so we have a better understanding of not just our process, but their process. There's some chemicals that they're like, if you ever just want to dump all of this, we will take it because it helps their process.
Samantha
Nope,
and Bethany,
no.
thank you.
Oh, sorry, I
Thank you so
was
much.
reading.
No, yes, fine. This is Crystal with TDEC, and I was wondering from both of your perspectives, and Samantha, I think you would know this even though you're not in the industry or wastewater treatment plant. So it sounds like, well, I'm wondering if a wastewater treatment plant, if y'all know of, I guess from Samantha, do you know of a wastewater treatment plant that's ever told a facility, no, we don't want your industry because we don't want to develop a pre-treatment program? And then Bethany, you've kind of already addressed this from a different view, but you said it's very helpful to work with yours. So do you think Morristown would ever say, no, don't expand, don't do this? It sounds like they're more willing to work with you. So kind of same questions from two different perspectives.
I'll go ahead. Yes, actually, it happens far more often than you expect. So there are currently 100 approved programs in the state of Tennessee, but there are roughly 300 cities and towns. So naturally, industries want to move to Tennessee all the time, and I am constantly meeting with our external affairs groups that are organizing those new industries moving in, trying to push them towards places that already have pretreatment programs, because most cities that don't already have one do not want one, because it costs about $60,000 to do the development, and that's just the development portion of it, not the maintaining. And so unless the industry is willing to front that bill, more often than not, it's only cities that already have a program that are willing to accept additional industries.
And then from my viewpoint, most of the places I've worked have been in a heavily industrial area. So Morristown, Cleveland, Tennessee, and then some places in Kentucky as well. Um, I've never heard a no, but just potentially, if this is what you're going to do, then this is what it would take to be able to make it happen.
It's so good to hear that you have a good relationship with them and that they're even promoting, like, yes, please use this chemical because it would be helpful in our processes, because you wouldn't know that otherwise. You would just kind
Right.
of assume, oh, they don't want this, or yeah, they wouldn't be okay with this. But because you
Hmm.
have that open relationship with them, it probably allows your facility to do more,
Yep.
or at
Anytime
least
we have
take more risks.
questions, yep, we just invite them on site and we're like, this is what we want to do. And I mean, they're the experts, so they're gonna know way more than me. So yeah, there's usually just that very good relationship.
Thank you.
All right, so what I'd like to do now, and if you still have questions, please feel free to write those in the chat. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to go ahead and um, go back while we still got a little bit more time to our questions. Let's see. Y'all able to see that from Mentimeter. So now we're going to, and if you are off of it, you can, I'll put the QR code right there so you can scan it again. But same questions as before we started. As a result of, but this time, of course, it's after we've heard all the information and really listened to the presentation. So the hope is that there's a little bit deeper understanding of these topics. So if you guys wouldn't mind scanning that, answering that truthfully, and hopefully he taught you something today. So let's see. And once again, 1 is still very unfamiliar with these topics, 5 being an expert now. Ooh, we got some experts in here. Right. Love to see that. Right, I think that's about, and then there's one last question. Now we won't see these answers to this, but this just helps us moving forward. And it says, how likely are you to make changes at your facility with the information that you learned today? So, if you aren't in the industry or um, at a manufacturer, it could still be along the lines of how likely are you to change the work that you do, or embed some of what you learned into your day-to-day, hopefully making the pre-treatment program that you deal with, whatever part of that it is, just better. And like I said, didn't want these to be shown just because if everybody's like, not likely, not likely, not likely, I didn't want our speakers to be like, oh, we didn't do a good job. That's not the case. This just helps us sort of, once we're done here, what we like to do is reach out to facilities and see if the technical resources that we create have jump-started new ideas or started a new program or anything like that, and this allows us to be able to reach out to you guys and see sort of what came of the information that we shared. So very thankful for everybody taking the time to do these. I know sometimes it's a little bit extra, but it's something different and added to our typical webinars where you're not just sitting and listening. It's a little bit of a interactive piece to it. So I'm going to stop sharing there. I don't see any more questions, but make sure nobody's raising their hand. Not seeing anything there. But if you're sitting at dinner tonight and you're like, oh man, I wish I would have asked our speakers that question, feel free to shoot me an email, and I will work on getting those answers to you, either in the follow-up or just specifically to you guys. I wanted to say thanks to our speakers, Bethany and Samantha. Really important work that you guys do, and very proud to be able to pull y'all, the experts, together to speak to our industry here in Tennessee. And like I mentioned before, the recording of this webinar will be sent out, put on our YouTube channel, so it can sit as a resource for industry. So if somebody that this might be able to help, once you receive that link, feel free to share that or use it, as your own little resource in our vast library of technical assistance that we hope to provide to the industry in the state. I will be pulling the presentation slides together, putting that in a PDF and sending it to you guys. Everyone should have my email, but I'll put that in the chat right now just in case you don't. Feel free to email me with new ideas for webinars, workshop ideas, anything that you want to learn that we could help out and bring the experts to you. Always looking for new ideas. So also, if you are in industry and you are not familiar with the Tennessee Green Star Partnership, it's our program, a voluntary sustainability leadership program for manufacturers here in the state of Tennessee. Would love to give you guys some more information about that. Reach out to me, and I hope everybody has a great rest of the week. Thanks for being here.